Hello there. My name is Major Greg Arabian. I'm honorably discharged from the United States Air Force, in which I was a major, and I'm I'm director of the oral history program of Post 41 AMVETS, the Corporal Paul S. Marsubian Post. And we're here today to take the oral history of Vahe Berberian, who is a member of this post and who served honorably under very difficult conditions during World War II. I think you're going to like his history, and I think you're going to appreciate the sacrifices that he gave in behalf of his country. There are 13 million veterans in this country. Did you know that, Vi?
No, I didn't.
13 million veterans. That was the estimate of about 2 years ago. And we are losing about 1,500 veterans every year. And as it goes along, the veterans are, as they get older, the rate of death amongst them is increasing. The reason for that is, the reason why we're concerned with that statistic is that if we don't get these oral histories from these very courageous veterans, we are going to lose a very important part of history. Realizing that, the United States Congress passed a public law authorizing the American Folklife Center, in connection with the Library of Congress, to undertake what they call the Veterans History Project. And at Post 41 here, we are in a rush, we are in a hurry, we are in haste, trying to get all of the raw material of this history, this oral history from our veterans, into tape form, following which we will perfect these oral histories for purposes of information, education, and inspiration of subsequent generations, because we don't know when this story will be seen by anybody. It could be that long after we're gone, subsequent generations will see this tape, learn lessons from it based upon the oral history of our veterans, like Vi here, and hopefully this would be of benefit to them. Freedom, as we have said so often, freedom is not free. Freedom requires sacrifice. It requires sacrifice of blood, sweat, and tears. It requires sacrifice in terms of a career that people would have had they not gone into the service, and it requires sacrifice in terms of effort, all of which these veterans gave, whether they were in active combat or not. So what I'm going to do, Vi, with your permission, and of course, Vi, you've signed a veterans release form releasing this information to any public agency, right? We intend to distribute this information to the Watertown Library, the veterans organizations, to Post 41, and we will be giving you your own tape on that. So you'll sign that with this permission, isn't that right?
Right.
And we will be releasing this information. Nothing is secret here. Everything is public. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to get out of this picture and zoom into Vi and start this oral history, which will be followed by a description of some of the memorabilia he's brought with him from the war, which would make the oral history that much more interesting. So let's start. Is that okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay, fine.
Fine.
Well, all right. Vi, why don't we start with asking you, where were you born?
I was born in Somerville, Massachusetts.
And your father's and mother's name?
My father's name was Khachadud. My mother's name was Sahaganush.
And where did they come from?
They came from Armenia.
Uh-huh.
One was from, one was a Casidic Sea, and the other was a Giddid Sea.
Uh-huh. And they came over to this country, and you were born in Somerville.
Right.
What was your father's occupation?
My father was owned the Warren Street Market in Arlington.
Uh-huh. And you helped them, I suppose?
Yeah, I spent practically my whole life there.
You
except
did?
with the interruption of World War II.
Okay. And you went to Somerville schools, did you?
No, after living in Somerville for approximately a year, my father bought the market in Arlington, and then we moved from Somerville to Arlington, Mass, where I've lived the rest of my life.
Okay, so you were educated in the Arlington schools?
I was educated in the Arlington schools.
And graduated Arlington High School?
I did.
With what year?
I graduated out in high school in 1941.
Uh-huh. Do you remember Pearl Harbor?
I do.
What did you feel about that? Where were you when you heard about it?
I hate to say this, but I was at a friend's house, and we were sitting down, 7 of us playing poker. And all of a sudden, the news flashed on the TV, and everybody was gung-ho, ready to go fight the Japs. At that time, we were so mad.
You were. And so you graduated in 41, did you?
Right.
In June of 41?
Yes,
Okay, so you had been working for your father at the market.
I had been.
Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
Okay. And where did you take your induction?
Fort Devens.
All right. Paperwork done there?
Paperwork was done at Fort Devens.
All right. Didn't do any training there?
No.
Okay. What was the scene at Fort Devens? Do you recall?
Well, the only thing at Fort Devens was we were just there to get ready to be a ship to different companies, and in my particular case, I was shipped to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, where I became a member of the 398th Engineer Battalion,
Uh-huh.
which I stayed for about a year before we were shipped to England. I stayed in England for about a little over a year it was. And then, of course, I missed the D-Day, but it wasn't after that I was transferred from 398 to become one of the first replacements of one of the wounded soldiers of 10th Armored Division.
Okay. Going back to from your transition from induction down to Louisiana, of course, Fort Devens is in the Northeast, which is a heck of a lot cooler than Louisiana. Were you given summer uniforms, winter uniforms?
We were given fatigues and more or less summer uniforms.
Summer uniforms in Devens.
No, in Devens we were just given our regular Army uniform.
Any equipment?
No.
Okay, so you're just giving your regular Army uniforms because
Just
this would have been during the winter, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you went down to Louisiana
Right?
and Camp Claiborne.
Camp Claiborne.
Describe what you saw when you got to Camp Claiborne.
Well, Camp Claiborne was my first time away from home, and of course we met with different people from different parts of the country. And one of the things that I remember is we had a gang come in from North Carolina, and boy, we were never as rowdy as these boys.
No.
And then while we were there, they had some kind of a flood in Arkansas, and we were called out to go out and put sandbags and stuff to try to hold the water back. Weather was very warm, very uncomfortable.
And very wet.
Very wet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So where were you? You had barracks at Camp
Yes,
Claiborne?
right.
What were the conditions of the barracks?
They were good.
The tents or wood?
No, they were regular wooden barracks. Although when we went to fight the flood, which was probably a week, we lived in tents there because we didn't travel back and forth.
That was close by
Yeah.
Arkansas. You they transferred you there by truck.
Yes.
Okay, and so how long did you fight the flood?
Probably about a week.
Yeah, and then you returned back to Camp Claiborne.
Right.
Okay. Now, You didn't have any, choice as to what service branch or what battalion or what section
No,
you were to join. Is that correct? They just assigned you.
that's right.
Okay. So your first days in the service was fighting a flood, and then you went back to Camp Claiborne, and what happened there?
Well, Camp Claiborne, we took our basic training.
Which
Yeah.
consisted of?
Well, which consisted of hikes, learning to fire a rifle, a lot of physical activities to get us strong,
Infiltration techniques?
infiltration, gas mask drills, anything to do with being able to survive if you went into combat.
And hand grenades,
Learn how to
machine guns?
Yeah, hand grenades, rifles, machine guns. We learned all the things that a soldier would have to know if they were to call him to go into combat.
You hadn't had any training in weapons, had you?
No, not before.
And this was all new to you?
Oh, very, very new.
Uh-huh. And how were your instructors?
They were all, most of them were really seasoned Army veterans.
It's good that we had some people already in the service that knew what they were doing. And you had complete faith in them,
Well, I did.
and you did what you were told.
I did what I was told. I tried to be a good soldier.
Okay. So your involvement in the service was voluntary. You had no feelings of protest,
No,
and you had no feelings against the government,
no,
and you felt it necessary to do what you had to do.
I did.
Okay. Now, from Camp Claiborne, where did you go from there?
From Camp Claiborne, we went to England.
Mhm.
And we stayed, we did different activities in England, but what we were doing, we were training more or less that someday we were going to get ready to go over in France and Germany and fight Hitler.
How were you transferred from Camp Claiborne to England, by air or ship?
No, from Camp Claiborne, we were transported to England on the Queen Mary,
Queen Mary? Ah,
which was great.
really? How were the accommodations?
They were fine. Most of the time, I slept on the deck going over because the ride over in the Queen Mary was like floating in the air.
It was. So the seas went rough.
No, and
And that-
especially it was a big ship, so
Right.
it was fine.
Did you have escorts? Like
I don't-
battleships?
I don't think we had escorts, and I don't think we needed it with the Queen Mary.
It was a pretty fast ship.
It was fast ship, right?
Okay. Did you have an opportunity up to this time to correspond with your father and your mother and your family?
Well, of course, only by mail.
Uh-huh. But not by telephone?
No,
No. So you're able to write back and forth?
I did.
Okay. And you kept a regular correspondence with them?
I did.
And they were happy to hear from you, I
Oh,
suppose?
yes.
Yeah. Okay, so when you say you elected to sleep on deck on the Queen Mary, what were the bunking arrangements?
Well, they had us assigned to bunks where we could sleep, but sometimes rather than be down in the bunk, I much preferred being up on the deck.
And what was the food like?
Food was good. Of course.
Good hot food?
Yeah, it was fine.
You had no problem?
No.
Mix with your friends, your troops there?
Well, of course, after spending time in Louisiana through basic training, everybody seemed to mix with a certain group. What we seemed to do as our little group, and everybody had their own little groups, like.
You had a few poker games across the
We did.
Atlantic? Okay. And when you got to England, where'd you land?
Gee, right offhand, I can't remember. I think it might have been Liverpool. or one of them places.
Would that be southern England or?
Southern England.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Describe what happened when you arrived there. Describe what you encountered.
Well, of course, they assigned us to different places, and then I can remember we spent one winter in England, and the place was offhand I can't remember the name of the place, but it was a cold place. And I remember at that particular time we were living in tents.
Uh-huh.
And the last fella who went to bed would fill the pot-bellied stove with coal right to the top.
Really?
And they used to have us get up at 5 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And by that time, the fire usually would go out. So it was a cold winter.
Uh-huh.
I just can't remember the name of the
The camp?
no, not the camp, but the channel that the wind was blowing from, and we were right close to that channel.
You were close to the ocean,
Yes.
so you were getting offshore breezes.
Well, we went from, we transferred from one place to another while we were in England.
Okay. Now, when you were in England, did you receive any further training, any advanced training?
Still the still the same training. At that particular time, we were more or less an engineer outfit designed to fixing bridges and stuff like that in case anything happened.
Okay, so let me just break it and ask you, did you receive training in erecting bridges?
Yes.
Where did you receive that, at Camp
Yeah.
Claiborne?
No, we received that in England.
In England?
Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of bridges did you erect?
Well, they would be wooden bridges. There was some kind of tompoon bridges, of course, rivers and stuff like that. Of course, we had men who we had people in our outfit who specialized in that.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever use the Bailey bridges as well?
That I don't remember.
You don't recall a Bailey bridge? Because Eddie Hiroshin, for instance, was a combat engineer who erected Bailey bridges.
Oh, is that right?
And I think Tony Zafarian also was in the combat engineers, and he recalls the Bailey bridges that were erected. But you learned all of this in England?
Right.
Okay. And how long was your stay in England?
I was probably in England approximately 18 months.
Mm-hmm. So that would bring you up to 40, 45?
No.
40.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, you got in 43, right?
43. It would be a lot, maybe not quite 18 months, maybe a little over a year in England.
In 44.
Right.
Okay. So the time came for you to, and when you were in England, were you able to mix with the local population?
Oh, sure.
And how did they treat you?
They treated us great.
They did.
Yeah. Well, the thing of it was, what happened was, finally, after that much time, the outfit that I was in was not a combat outfit. So what I did was I asked for transfer to a combat outfit. And what they did is they shipped me to France to a repo depot. And that was how I was finally assigned to the 10th Armored Division, Company C Engineers.
So you asked for a combat assignment?
Right.
Okay. While you were in England, were you ever entertained by any of these overseas entertainers like Bob Hope or something like that?
Not Bob Hope, but we used to have little dances and stuff, but not by, I particularly never had any of the big entertainers.
And USO?
The USO was good.
USO was good?
Yeah.
So you were able to lead somewhat of a normal life?
Right.
In England. Okay. So the time came for you to leave England, is that correct?
That's right.
And how did you request a transfer? Did you go to your commander and ask him?
Our company was had orders to transfer to France. And we had already been through D-Day. We were still in England, but we knew that sooner or later we were all going to go there. So rather than spend time in this kind of an outfit, I really wanted to get into the fight.
Okay. Now, where were you on D-Day?
I was in England
Still
on
in
D-Day.
Do you remember D-Day?
I remember, I do remember D-Day. And to me, D-Day was one horrible, horrible sacrifice of our boys, because while we were in England, we saw so many of them come back really in tough shape. That was a big, big sacrifice for us. We lost a lot of nice young boys there.
Did you see these wounded and maimed veterans coming back before you went to France?
Some of them.
You did. And despite the fact that you saw these people wounded and maimed and disabled, you wanted to go.
Well, I want to be part of
You did.
I want to be part of the action.
Okay. So,
I must say this, sometimes after, I regretted it, but,
Yeah.
everything worked out fine.
there were many like you.
It's war and combat is something that you could tell people, but they don't quite know what you're talking about, because you have to be there to see just how you're going to react to all the tensions there. Some of us took it good, some of us couldn't take it so good. But it's an experience that I'll never forget.
And half of the time you're on the attack, and half of the time you're trying to protect yourself.
That's right.
Okay. So, D-Day being June 6, 1944, when did you arrive in France?
I would say it might have been probably October, November of 1944.
Okay, so this was June, July, August, September, about 4 months
Right.
after. And where did you land?
I landed in, I think we landed in Cherbourg at that time there, because what they did is they sent me to a replacement bureau where I was going to be assigned to a new outfit, which I already told you was the 10th Armored Division.
Yeah, so you went to Cherbourg. You didn't land in Omaha Beach or anything else
No.
like that. Yeah, you went to Cherbourg. And describe what you saw when you arrived at Cherbourg.
Well, of course, it was just actually a stay where they put you into a camp, and then finally, I was only there 2 or 3 days when my assignment came up, and then what they did is they would transfer us by truck to our new outfits.
And
Everybody would, all the ones who were replacing the wounded and the dead would go by truck to different units, some to infantry, some to armored, some wherever it was.
And was there any devastation in where you were in Cherbourg?
No.
There was no devastation there?
Not while I was there.
Okay. So where were you assigned, and how did you get there?
I was assigned to I was assigned to the 10th Armored Division, and I was driven there by one of our 6x trucks.
Uh-huh. And what happened?
I can remember first arriving at Company C, Engineer Battalion, and I think it was my second night. They asked us, we had to go on some kind of a patrol, and they were asking for volunteers. Being new, I wanted to get to know the boys better, so I was one of the ones who volunteered to go on patrol.
Uh-huh.
And we did run into Germans, and we retreated back to our company. And for that, I remember, instead of sleeping out, they sent us back and we slept in a regular place. But it was the last time I learned you don't volunteer too much.
So that was the last time you
Yeah.
volunteered to go on patrol? Okay. So how far into France from Cherbourg did you drive? How far in from Cherbourg were you taken?
To go to...
Into France?
To go to our company?
Right.
Oh, I think probably, I think the 10th Army was probably about between 15 and 20 miles where their headquarters was.
Do you recall if you were near any of the French cities?
Offhand, I don't.
You don't. Okay. And so you had your first baptism of fire in this patrol.
Right.
And how were you equipped?
Well, I at that time,
Small
I had
arms?
an M1 rifle and regular GI clothing.
Okay. And after that, you say you came back. How far back did you come? Excuse me.
Oh,
You
just...
came back to your headquarters there?
Yeah, that was just
Okay.
like close by.
Was there much digging of foxholes and things like that?
Not at that particular time, but we did eventually come into that.
And what was the mission of your patrol? To find out where the enemy was?
Yeah,
Okay. And you found out where the enemy was?
yeah, right.
All right. Can you give us any information with regard to what you saw? Did they have tanks? Did they have soldiers?
What we saw, we just ran into, probably, to me, it seemed at that particular time, we were an Americans being, and we must have run into the Germans who were doing the same thing, just going out on a...
Trying to find out where you were?
That's right.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Now, you were, at this time, your specialty was it infantry, or was it combat engineers?
No,
or what
combat engineers.
it was still combat engineers, but you did run
Well,
patrols.
the way it worked is, an armored division has infantry, tanks, engineers, and everything. It's a unit that goes out, and if the tanks get stopped, it's up to the engineers to make sure they get out there, and whatever's stopping the tanks, if it's a bridge down, or put a bridge up, or sometimes what we would do is, if they had a place zeroed in for the tanks, what we would do is we'd try to find some kind of a place where we could bypass it and put a bridge up if it needed to be, or if places had to be cleaned out, so that our main point was always to keep our tanks moving.
Okay. Okay, so your outfit was pretty much a self-contained unit. You had engineers in there, you had tank men, you had infantry, you had about how many people would you say were in your unit?
I think we ran about one, like a company, a sea engineer, and our unit probably ran about 10,000 men.
10,000, okay. And under what army were you?
I was in the Third Army under General George Patton.
Okay. Now, how long did this activity go on?
Well, I was with them probably about month, 2 months, approximately that time. And our biggest thing was one night we were in skirmishes, but nothing big. But what happened was one night we got a call, and we were going to go up and give one of the infantry divisions needed help, and we were going to take our armored outfit up. And that was when we got into the Battle of the Bulge, which was one of our biggest battles.
This was in December of
December
45?
1944.
44, okay. Now, your outfit was asked to relieve one of the
No,
other infantry outfit, or help?
No, we were gonna reinforce them
Okay. And this would be with tanks,
with tanks and.
with infantry?
Yeah, everything.
Okay. So, any idea whereabouts that was? What
Well,
part of the
we
bulge?
we were traveling, and we were packed on a road, almost bumper to bumper, because we figured we had to go about 20 or 30 miles before we were going to relieve or help one of the infantry divisions. And the next morning, when we woke up, the Germans were probably within a mile of us, and they were shooting at us point blank. We were losing men, tanks, and everything. It was a terrible, terrible ordeal.
So, were you surprised?
Very, very surprised.
Uh-huh. So here you were intending to reinforce a unit, and you came under attack.
That's right.
Okay.
But I have to say one thing. While retreating, I was heading for one of these gas trucks, and I happened to be next to my lieutenant, who asked me, "Berberian, where you going?" I says, "I'm going to try to take this gas truck out of here and take it back to the thing." He says, "Keep away from it. You stay with me." And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my lieutenant, because someone else had the same idea. And just as we reached the top of the hill, the one who was driving, 88 shell hit it, and this poor boy was gone.
Yeah. They had 88s there.
88, oh yes. That
Yeah.
was one of the Germans' biggest thing, was the 88. We knew the whistle of an 88.
You did, yeah, yeah. Of course, that was a piece of German artillery, is that right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and the shells had a distinctive sound to them.
That's right.
And they were particularly accurate, weren't they?
They were very accurate.
Yeah, okay. So, when you were you retreating on foot? Were you retreating?
We were retreating on foot.
Okay,
And as far as I can remember, we went back to a town, and we tried to reassemble, because everything was in such a mess, because it happened so unexpected that we were really broken up into different sections, and had different places to try to protect.
did you have to abandon all of your vehicles?
No, we kept whatever vehicles we had. We did lose a lot on that first day when they hit us.
But they were able to turn around and
Whatever we
hit
could,
some.
we took out of there.
Okay. And you set up a defense line there?
We did.
And how did that work out?
Well, I could say this, we sometimes encountered, sometimes we didn't know whether they were Germans or what, but I can remember one thing very, very clearly. We were guarding this town, and I was on an outpost guard, and all of a sudden we seen a German tank column coming. And of course, we pulled these mines across the, landmines across the road, and retreated with two of my other buddies back to the company to tell them that a German tank column was coming. So right away we left there, and we went about 2 miles up the road, and then we took a right, and we started to, we were going to put up a defense against the German
Tanks.
column. And I can only say this, when I looked around and saw what we had against what was coming at us,
Yeah.
that German column never took that right, went straight ahead, or I wouldn't be sitting here today telling you this story. I know that.
Okay. And the mines that you laid didn't amount
This
to
I
much?
don't know.
You
This
don't
I don't know because, you know, we just pulled them, we had mines on a rope. And the idea was if any German tanks were coming, we'd pull the rope across the road with the with the mines on it, and then we disappeared.
I see. So, so they didn't take the right, you did, and they kept going straight.
Right.
I see. And what did you do? Did you retreat further?
Well, no, what we were doing was, we weren't retreating anymore. Wherever we were trying to hold our position. Everybody was trying to hold whatever position there was. And what happened was, I think I might have been there 4 or 5 weeks. And it was,
You were able to hold your position that long?
yeah, we were holding our position. And then what happened was, of course, it was a cold winter. It was the conditions were bad. And then what happened was, one night when they were shelling us, no, it was during the day, a shell blew about 20 yards from me, blew the helmet right off my head. And how I got through it, I don't know, but the only thing that happened was something happened to my left eye.
No.
And when I went to the medics the next morning complaining about my eye, the doctor took a look at it. The next thing I knew, I was on a plane going to Paris,
No.
France, and to the hospital there.
So you had an injury to your eye?
I did. I lost
Okay.
the partial sight of my left eye.
Uh-huh.
Very, very painful for a long time, and the doctors there were great. And finally, one of them come up with they shot a needle of penicillin right into my eye.
Oh, boy.
After a week of suffering and everything they did, and finally this seemed to stop the pain.
Uh-huh. Okay. And so how, in what hospital you?
I don't
was it a
remember
hospital
what
in
hospital
Paris?
it was, but I was in the hospital.
Okay.
And after that, I was released, and I went back to my outfit.
These are Army doctors,
Right.
and they weren't French doctors.
No, they were U.S. Army doctors, and
Yeah.
one of them was, I don't know what his name is now, but he was great.
Did a good job.
Yeah,
So they sent you back to your outfit,
right.
even after you were in the hospital?
Well, after I was in the hospital 5 weeks, then I was fine.
Okay.
My eye was better, of course. I've never had the real sight of that, of my left eye, but
You were good enough to go back?
I was good enough to go back.
Okay. So where did you join your outfit?
I did.
They're happy to see you, I suppose.
They were,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
some of them were there, some weren't, but that's the way it was. And we were going to,
But the Battle of the Bulge was done by the time you got back?
that was done.
That was done. Okay. Did you receive, while you were in the hospital, did you receive news that the Battle of the Bulge had been
Oh, I
overcome?
followed it we all followed the war very, very closely.
And was it basically the fact that the Air Force got in there and weather cleared up and the Air Force was able to get back
That's
in
right.
there? Okay.
In fact, I shouldn't say that I shouldn't say that when I got back, the Battle of the Bulge was over. It was almost over. Because I can remember being on a tank on a 50 caliber when the weather cleared, and I could still see our planes swooping down with first they dropped the bomb, and then they'd come swooping down, and then they'd open fire with those machine guns and those different forests and stuff, and then we knew once the weather cleared, our air supremacy ended.
Couldn't get over that, huh?
Yeah.
They couldn't overcome
No.
you there. were you taking any prisoners
We
at
were
that time?
taking lots of prisoners.
Really?
We were taking lots of prisoners, and I have to say this, a lot of them were not Germans. They were from different countries who were forced into the German army.
Uh-huh.
And I think a lot of them were looking for a chance to surrender if they could.
Really?
Just to get out of the war.
Did the amount of people who surrendered present an obstacle to your progress?
Not as far as we were concerned.
Yeah.
They were just shipped back to different camps.
Yeah. And they didn't constitute a danger to you?
No.
When they surrendered, they surrendered. It's
They
not like
surrendered.
today,
No.
like they have recalcitrant prisoners.
No,
Yeah.
we had no problem like that.
Okay. So you were going one way and they were going the other.
That's
is that
right.
it? Okay. And now, you pressed forward with your attack, did you? With
Then, of course, the war wasn't over, and we were assigned a different thing. Now, what we were going to do is we were going to go to transfer to we were going to make an assault crossing the Saar River, and I could remember they had an outfit come down to lay smoke down on the river so that to give us some so the Germans wouldn't see us. And some of them were afraid to come down there, but our commanding officer pulled his rifle off and told them to get those drums down there and light them. The crossing of the Saar River, and just before the river, one of those 88 shells hit, and I got wounded for the second time. I got shrapnel in my right leg.
Okay. Now, was it your job to lay down the smoke?
No, that was a different outfit.
Okay. But at that time,
Every
your activity was the activities that you performed were those of an infantryman.
we were part infantry, but our objective on that was to make sure we try to get, in case anything happened, we would have to
Erect a pontoon bridge or whatever kind of bridge
something to get them
necessary.
over.
Okay,
Right.
so you were pretty much a close combat support
Right.
for the
We
Third
work very, very much as a unit.
Okay. So was the Saar River the first river that you crossed going into Germany?
Well, one of the bigger ones.
One of the bigger ones.
ones that was important.
How big is the Saar River?
That I could.
Wide as the Mississippi? How long did it take to cross? Any idea?
Oh,
Well, you never crossed it because you were wounded.
I never crossed it. In fact, it was nighttime when I got hit.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
you know,
What were you doing when you were hit?
well, we were working our way down to the river because there was 50 caliber machine guns and 88 shells coming over.
Yeah.
And I remember saying that, I got hit, and they told me, to retreat back, make sure I stayed down because the 50s was shooting, and you could see the fifth one usually was a tracer. So
Yeah.
it took a lot of crawling to get back.
These were 50s that were being shot by us or the other
No,
side?
by the
By the other
Germans.
side?
By the
Okay.
Germans.
So they had 50 caliber machine
Oh,
guns as
yeah.
well. How about our air support?
Well, at that particular time, we didn't have no air support.
No air
It
support.
wasn't a big encounter.
And let me ask you, going back a little bit, from the time you landed at Cherbourg till the time you got to the Saar River, did you encounter any air activity on the part of the German, the Luftwaffe?
We ran into very, very little German
Aircraft?
aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
We were pretty well in control of the skies.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember night times, hearing our bombers going over and bombing Germany, and it was like incredible the amount of bombers that they sent in over Germany,
Really?
and the amount of bombs that they dropped there.
And you saw these during the daytime as well?
Mostly at nighttime.
Mostly at nighttime?
Mostly at nighttime.
Okay. And did that have an effect on the morale of your unit?
Oh, we always used to say how great our Air Force was and how lucky they were that they were going to go back to England while we were still staying in the foxholes in the different buildings of Germany.
Of course, some of them never came back.
That's right.
Right. And Germany seems to be depending a lot on their 88s. Did they have a lot of 88s? Did you?
That was one of their biggest artillery, as far as I knew.
Yeah, yeah. So, when you got wounded in your leg, what happened? You retreated
I
back?
got back. I worked my way back to a field hospital.
You were able to do that under your own power?
I was, and this was, and I could still remember the nurse when I pulled in and they took my pants off and started dressing the wound. They said that they never seen such a happy soldier.
Really?
But you could take so much of it, but it was
Yeah.
good to get a break every so often. So
Right. So they dressed your wound.
they did, and then I was sent to a major hospital where they took out the shrapnel, and I stayed there. I stayed there probably about 2 weeks before I went back to my outfit again.
Again, you went back to your
I
outfit?
went back to my outfit again.
Really? Okay. So it was more of a flesh wound, so to speak?
Well, more like shrapnel, and they had to take the shrapnel out and make sure you didn't get
Infection.
infected and stuff like that.
No broken bones?
No broken bones.
Okay. So again, you went back to your outfit,
I went back to my outfit, but,
and they welcomed you.
oh yeah, and at that time there, of course, the war was more or less, we more or less had won the war. It was just the idea of the cleanup operation.
You were taking more and more prisoners?
A lot of prisoners.
Really?
A lot of prisoners, and we finally ended up in a place called Garmisch-Partenkirchen when we finally got the news that the war was over. 10th Armored took over the territory, and we were living in houses at that particular time, and they took over this lake resort, and they sent us so many from each company to the resort for a week's vacation.
This
and I
was
was
in-
one of the lucky ones who went.
This was in Garmisch.
Garmisch,
Garmisch.
beautiful country.
Yes, I've some of my service buddies have told me about Garmisch. It's a very nice German resort area, and I think we have a base there now, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, where were you when you heard that Roosevelt had died? That would be in April of '45.
Oh, gee, I really don't know, Greg.
No.
I was someplace in Germany.
When would you recall hearing about it?
I remember hearing about it, right?
Uh-huh. How did the troops feel?
Well, we all were saddened by it.
Yeah, but you had a job to do.
That was the thing.
Okay. Now, you say you heard that the war was over, or did you felt that the war was going to be over?
Well, we knew the end was coming.
Yeah.
Because we were running into less and less opposition. And then finally it was over,
And more prisoners.
more and more prisoners, not so much opposition. Lots of times, I can remember one time we were fixing a road to put our tanks through, and this was at nighttime, and I can remember in the morning when morning came, out of the woods came all these German prisoners, German soldiers, with their hands up,
Really?
giving up Whereas if they wanted at nighttime, if they wanted a fight, we could have had quite a fight, but their fighting days were over.
Were over.
They knew
Right.
that the Americans had won.
What happened to, did they turn down their arms? How did you handle their arms, their rifles, their tanks, their weapons? Were you involved in that effort at all?
The only thing was, when they came out, we had nothing to do with the tanks, but if they had any weapons, we took the weapons from them.
Okay, all right. And you, of course, didn't have any conversation with any of them.
No.
They just put their hands up and surrendered and walked the other way. Have you since visited any memorials or participated in any war commemorations?
2 years ago, which would be 2001, my wife and I went to Germany for a week vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And while we were there, they gave us one free day. And my wife asked me what we were going to do on our free day, and I said, you know, all this time I talked to you how beautiful Garmisch was, not only for its beauty itself, but that's where I was when the war ended. I says, tomorrow morning, we're going to get on a train, and we're going to go to Garmisch-Partenkirchen. And we got on the train that morning, we went through the mountains. It was winter time, November. Beautiful, beautiful. But I have to say this, we got to Garmisch, and we went to this, we wanted an American-speaking German to take us on a trip in his taxi. And when I told him where we were and where the lake was that the 10th Army had taken over, he wasn't quite sure. But we did go. Whether it was there or not, I don't know. But I do know this. When I got to Garmisch, I couldn't remember one street, one house, or one thing. Things had changed so much.
Oh, it had changed, of course, 50 years.
So much so that it was still beautiful, but I thought I would remember where I stayed and what we did and this, that, and other thing, but everything was completely different.
Is this
beautiful, but different.
Is Garmisch now a resort area?
No, they have where he took us as a resort was still a resort, but
Nothing
some
like
hotel was beautiful.
Nothing like what you remember?
No.
Okay. And did you, either at the time that you were there as a soldier or later, did you at all encounter any resentment or resistance on the part of the Germans when you told them that you were there as a soldier in World War II? You didn't recognize any resentment? Okay. Now, all during this time that you were going across France and Germany, did you was it a straight combat situation? You didn't have any opportunity to mix locally with the people, or?
Well, of course, the thing was, a lot of it was rebels, a lot of bombings, and we didn't have too much to do at first. Then what happened was, as we were going more and more, and after the bulge in them, and the war was more or less changing, and we could see that we were going to win the war, we fraternized a little bit more with the Germans.
But describe some of the devastation that you saw as you went along.
There'd be towns that were just right down to the ground.
Pretty much flattened.
Pretty much flattened is right.
Yeah.
And one of the things, as we were taking the towns, one of the things that we were not supposed to do, we weren't supposed to take anything, stuff like that, but we more or less stuck to it.
Yeah.
The American soldiers as a whole were good.
They were all right.
And of course, we didn't blame the German people. It was just something that happened, and more or less glad when the end finally came.
Right. Now, you said that you had encountered these troops that were in the Battle of the Bulge, and some of these prisoners that weren't from Germany, they were from other areas. How did you know that?
Well, from what they talked to our interpreters
Oh, I
and
see.
what they told us.
Okay.
But I must say this, I will say this. As bad as war was, some soldiers loved it. I'll never forget when I got wounded in the Bulge, and they brought some paratroopers, and they brought in this one boy. I got to tell you this story. His feet were black as coal, and he was laying next to me. And when I asked him how come he stayed that long, he said he'd never fought. He'd played basketball, football, but he'd never played a sport like this. He wouldn't leave until finally he had to leave. He was in such bad condition. But
Yeah.
most of us, more or less, were not quite as
Gung-ho.
gung-ho as that.
So, when you say that they like to go into combat, you're saying that of the American troops as well as the Germans? I suppose there's enough on either side.
Some
like
of the
combat.
American
Sure,
troops.
sure.
Of course, a lot of things happened that made you feel so bad.
Yeah.
Now, one of our missions was if we ran into a tank field, one of the things of the engineers was we had to clean that that minefield up so our tanks could go through. And one of the saddest things I saw was we had a field finally cleared, and our tanks were going to go through. And the lead tank, right underneath its threads,
Yeah.
when it started and rolled just a short distance, there was a mine underneath it, and it blew up, and my sergeant lost the sight of both of his eyes, and and I've never forgotten that.
He was in the tank.
No, he was directing the
Tank.
Directing it
Oh,
out.
yeah. Okay. Now, where you stayed some. We have about another 4 minutes on this tape, but you stayed in Garmisch for a while, did you?
Yeah.
And then from Garmisch, where did you go?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, from Garmisch there, I was, of course, the ones, we had a lot of new replacements come in. And naturally, they gave us, the ones who had been with the outfit, the softer jobs.
Yeah.
And I more or less had a soft job then. In fact, I was gonna go to France on a vacation, and when I come back, they told me that I had got my papers to come home, but I said, oh, I'd wait till I come back from my vacation. But all my first sergeant and all the boys that I'd been through combat with were going back, so I decided to pass the vacation and come home with them.
So you didn't make it to France?
No, I didn't make it. I had been to France before because I had been, one time when we come off the lines, they had a pick of some men to go to France for a 3 or 4 day trip, and I was one of the lucky ones to go, and having no money, all our comrades contributed so much, and with that money I went to spent 3 or 4 days in Paris.
But there was still quite a bit of devastation all along the route.
Oh yeah, a lot of devastation.
So you wanted to go despite the devastation.
Oh yeah, of course.
There's a lot of areas in France that weren't devastated.
Well, no, that's true.
Yeah. So when you left Garmisch, how did you describe how you left Garmisch and where you went?
Well, when we were going to come home, the ones who were going, we were put in trucks, and we were transferred to one of the seaports in France, and they had what they called cigarette camps, because that's what they were named after.
Oh, yes.
And you'd stay there until finally your orders came that you were going to leave such and such a date, and then we would they'd assign us to a ship. But when I come home, I didn't come home in the Queen Mary. I come home in a completely different ship.
A regular troop ship?
Oh, boy, I'll tell you, I was never so sick of my life. This
That
thing
was probably one of those Kaiser ships
Yeah,
that
it
they
was
put
a
together.
real tough trip coming home.
How
Took
was
us
it?
5 days to get there, and I don't know, probably 10 days to come back, but
Really?
it was a tough trip.
Okay.
But something good to look forward to.
Okay. In 5 days to the United States.
Oh, no.
Where'd you go?
5 days coming, but it took us over 10 days to get home.
Oh,
because
10
we
days to
didn't-
get home, 5
Yeah,
days to get...
because
Oh, I see.
we didn't go back on the Queen Mary. We went back on a real tanker that was, oh, boy, it was an ordeal, I'm telling you.
How's the food?
Sometimes the food was okay if you could, if you could stomach
keep
it.
it in your
you know,
stomach.
Yeah.
So the Queen Mary, it took 5 days for the Queen Mary to take you from the United States to England, but it took you 10 days to get
Well,
from
at
France.
least 10 days.
At least 10 days.
10 days or more.
Yeah.
It was an altogether different,
Yeah.
but still, the thing of it was, when we were going, we were encountering one thing, and when we were coming back, we were coming home,
Yeah.
which was,
And you were relieved, you had a sense
I
of
was.
relief. Okay. Now, you were telling me that you, all during your experience in the service, you had a fatalistic output, a fatalistic...
I did.
Uh,
I became a fatalist to the point where I couldn't understand sometimes how someone near me could get killed, and him and not me.
And you got wounded.
I'd
got
get
wounded
wounded.
twice.
I'd get wounded,
But
but
yet somehow
some
you
of
came out
my
of it.
friends were not as lucky, you know? And the thing of it is, we took one, each day as it came, and if we survived it, fine. If we didn't, well, that was it. But that's one of the ways that I got through the war.
Did the troops have a fatalistic attitude?
Well,
also?
some did and some didn't. That was that was the way I felt.
Yeah.
I just felt that to survive this thing, I've seen my comrades, some of them shake all night, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But one thing I'll say is, when nighttime came and we were either in a foxhole or wherever we were, I'd go to sleep and figure, if anything was gonna happen,
It was
it's gonna
gonna
happen.
happen.
And-
Okay.
And I think that's one of the
Uh-huh,
pluses on my side, was
Yeah.
my thinking like that.
yeah. So you were able to sleep even though there was...
I was. When
Yeah,
nighttime
yeah.
came, I was.
Okay. Now, did you, when you got home, did you call your parents or write to them, let them know you were coming?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And where did you land?
We landed in Boston.
In Boston. The ship came right directly to Boston?
To Boston.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, they took me to,
Was that the Navy Yard you came into? Boston
well, I
Harbor?
think we came right into Boston Harbor.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, they took us to Fort Devens.
Uh-huh.
And my folks were supposed to meet me there. And I could remember that, gee, for some reason, the signals got crossed.
Yeah.
And I waited and waited, and
They never came.
They didn't come. They were there, but we were at the wrong
Oh, I see.
places. And a person that was living in Somerville brought me home, and then they came home, and I was already in the house, and all my aunts, uncles, and everybody were waiting for me. And,
How did it feel to get back home?
I thought, to tell you the truth, I felt for quite a while like a war hero, because so much admiration and
From your family and
from
friends?
from my family.
They
and
knew
friends.
that you were in the war?
Yeah.
And there had been stories written about you?
Well, especially where the big thing was that they knew that I was in the bulge, and there were so many casualties that I was one of the lucky ones who survived it. You know?
When you came home, where did you pursue any civilian occupation, or did you return to the Warren Street Market?
The next day I was in the Warren Street Market. Because
Really?
I felt so bad that all this time my father had to be running that place by himself.
How did he feel about it?
Oh, I was his pride and joy.
Yeah, but you were happy. He was happy to have you with him the
Oh,
next
yeah.
day. He didn't say, "Why are you working? You got to take time off," or
Oh,
something
no,
like that.
no.
No,
He was glad to have me back, you
He
know.
was.
Yeah, and
Okay.
of course, we kept the business until I retired.
Uh-huh. Okay. Now, did you at all take any advantage of any of the benefits that the service gave you, like the GI Bill or anything like that?
I did. I
You
took,
did.
I took advantage of the GI Bill. Of course, I didn't, as far as education-wise, but what happened.
Mortgage help in buying a house?
Yeah, that's right.
Did you
That
find
was-
that particularly helpful?
Yes, very, very helpful.
Mhm.
And then what happened was, when I was discharged from the Army, I never talked about the wounds.
Uh-huh.
But what happened was, after about, I was home about a little over a year, something happened to that eye again, and the pain came back. And I went to my own doctor, my own eye doctor, and when he saw it, he was going to treat it with something, and I told him that when I had this problem in the hospital, the penicillin helped, and that's what he prescribed, and it cleared it.
Cleared it
But he
up.
did say to me, he wanted to know if I was getting disability for this eye, and I said no. And he says, you know, you're actually could be described as
Disabled veteran?
That could be the eye has lost its sight.
Right.
So I remember going into Boston to the VA and taking an examination, and the doctors there wanted to know how come I left the service without saying anything. And when I told them that, they told me there was so much red tape and stuff that I didn't want to go through it.
Right.
And I still remember them saying that your records are in front of us. We know what happened. And they
gave you the disability?
They gave me my disability, and they gave it retroactive to the day I was discharged.
So that helped you buy the house? Okay.
So things worked out.
Things worked out for the
Yeah,
better?
fine.
Okay. Do you have anything to say to future generations who may be contemplating entering the service? Because today we have a volunteer army. We don't have any draft. We may be initiating the draft now that we're having this trouble in Iraq. But what do you have to say with regard to young folks today who are contemplating entering the service or are reaching service age?
My own personal opinion is this. Going from the First World War, how that was fought, to the Second World War, how that was fought, I'd hate to think of the weapons that we have today going into another war, because the weapons we have today, not only are the soldiers who are going into combat going to be in tough shape, but even our folks at home, the weapons. I think another war would be almost like the end of the world.
End of the world.
I honestly believe, especially after seeing the bombs that landed in Japan.
And we have 10 times the destructive
That's
force
right.
of those now.
That's why I say
Yeah.
there'd be no safe place at all.
Uh-huh. So,
That's the way I feel about it.
but what would you say with regard to you? Of course, everybody wants to avoid war, but what would you say with regard to people who are contemplating entering the service?
Well, right now, it's like everything else. There's a lot of people who like a career in the
In the Army, Navy,
in
Marines, Air
yes,
Force?
they everyone is a different makeup, and I think there's some who really enjoy this type of activity.
And you would encourage them?
Well, if they really enjoyed it, fine, but you never know until you've been in this how you're going to react to it.
Okay, all right.
I've seen soldiers who I've trained with that were great,
Yeah,
but when the first shells started hitting, they weren't as great as some of the ones who you thought weren't going to be much. They were fighters.
yeah. So it takes war
Yeah.
to bring out the man, so to speak, bring out the,
I could remember during the Bulge, whenever we stayed in a town or we were set up, we always put a couple of men as an outpost, probably a mile from our camp, in case they ran into something.
okay.
And to be in an outpost post guard was really something. I'll never forget, one night, two of us, one left, never came back.
Yeah.
And I stood there for 2 hours by myself in an outpost. The scariest, longest 2 hours I spent in my life.
And you had no communication between the outpost
No, I
and the...
wouldn't leave my post.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't leave it. I wasn't the best soldier, but I was a good soldier.
But so far as your outpost activity, that's another thing. You had no communication at all with headquarters?
No, not while you were in outpost.
How, your duty at the outpost was to, what was your duty at the outpost?
Oh, in case we ran into it, in case some advancing troops were coming,
So if they were coming, how would you notify the,
you'd have to.
You have to run.
Run back.
run back?
Yeah.
I see. All right. Now, one thing here is that we're going to go through some of the memorabilia you brought with you, Vahe, okay?
Sure.
So let's just hold off here. Okay, Vahe, tell us what I'm holding in front of the camera now.
That's a picture of me when I was in England. We were living in tents.
How old were you?
I was going on 21 years old.
Uh-huh. And the tent doesn't show what kind of a platform you're in. Is this tent right to the ground? Slept on the ground?
Yeah, we were sleeping on bunks.
Uh-huh. Okay. And where was this now?
This was in by the Bristol Channel. This was a cold winter in England.
Uh-huh. Okay. Very good. Okay. Tell us something about the story of the Armored News that shows, what's the picture of you, is it?
That's right.
And it's headed a gold brick that's worth it. And it shows you kneeling on a pile of gold bars. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, in one of our exploits, we ran into, of course, they had been hiding gold, and we found a big attachment of gold bricks, and
This is in Walchensee, Bavaria.
yeah, 10th Armored was assigned to go and take the gold out, and we put it on our trucks, and then with tanks and air support, we transferred it to some headquarters in the United States, headquarters in one of the cities or something in Germany.
This is a hell of a temptation, isn't it?
I tried to break one of the pieces off, but it was like you couldn't even pierce it. It was so hard.
Really? And it says that the pile that you were kneeling on amounted to about $10 million.
And there was probably that's only one of the trucks.
So
there
one
was
of the
probably
trucks.
3 or 4 more.
So
That's
you
how much
liberated quite a cache of
That was
gold
quite
bars.
yeah, right.
Okay. Okay, now, here's a Western Union telegram. Can you tell us something about that? It's dated March 10, 1945, and it's addressed to Mrs. Vahe Berberian, 11 Exeter Street in Arlington.
That was a telegram, a Western Union that was sent to my folks that the second time I was wounded, and I can remember the postman bringing it into my folks, and they were scared to open it, but
Yeah. So they notified your parents when you were wounded as well as when you were killed.
that's right.
It says, the Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret that your son PFC Berberian Vahan was slightly wounded in Germany 24 February 45. New address and information followed direct from the hospital. And this is from J.A. Ulio, the Adjutant General. Do you know him?
No,
No. But this was a message. This is when you were injured crossing the, trying to cross the Saar River.
right.
Okay, so this would have been in
That
February.
was from shrapnel from the
From the 88.
from my leg.
Okay. Okay, now, here we have an ethnic newspaper, the Harnick Weekly, that has a 2-column story on you, kneeling on the $15 million worth of gold bars, and it gives you a story of your involvement in the war. Okay, here we have what do we have here now, Vahe?
That's for 10th Armored Division and 55th Armored Engineer participation in the Battle of the Bulge. Our organization was awarded the Presidential Citation from the President of the United States.
And it says, in part, these units distinguish themselves in combat against powerful and aggressive enemy forces, composed of elements of 8 German divisions during the period from 18 to 27 December 1944. By extraordinary heroism, Belgium's essential to a large-scale exploitation of the area around Bastogne by attacking constantly and savagely with the test units of armor and infantry. So this was a citation given to you by the President. Okay, next we have the award of the Purple Heart by direction of the President, September 22, 1943, and it has your name checked off here. February 25, 1945, technician 5th grade, private first class, Vahe Berberian, engineers, United States Army. And by the way, this is the Purple Heart that you received, is that
Right.
correct? Okay. The ribbon is on top here,
The ribbon was...
and the Purple Heart medal was awarded to you. Was it delivered to you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this one here, you've given me a story written by Hugh Shuck, staff correspondent of the News. I would assume this is probably the Stars and Stripes.
Right.
And it's headed, little groups of Yanks broke up big Nazi push. And the little group of Yanks was the 10th Armored Division, of which you were a part.
That's right.
And this is reported from the U.S. Third Army, January 4. And this would be of 1945, I guess, right?
44, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
It says, as details of fighting in the early stages of Field Marshal von Rundstedt's breakthrough emerge from a shroud of secrecy imposed by disrupted communications and censorship, it becomes more and more apparent that the initial impetus of the German drive was broken by isolated American units which chose to fight to the last cartridge against overwhelming odds. It was such a last-ditch fight by Major General Raymond Barton's 4th Infantry Division and part of Major General William H. Morris' 10th Armored Division, which kept the Germans from capturing the city of Luxembourg and its road network, over which Lieutenant General George Patton later moved his divisions to launch a counterattack. It was that kind of American resistance that centered around Burdorf, 17 miles northwest of the city of Luxembourg. So you were involved in the 10th Armored Division's blunting.
That's where we got the presidential.
Now, this is a certificate, is it? Tell us what the certificate is.
This was just a certificate of some of the enemy equipment that we picked up as we progressed through Germany.
You and many troops
Many troops.
were allowed to bring back memorabilia.
Well, we were allowed to bring back, but I sent these home.
Okay.
And then
What does it say here?
it just says that that the bearer, which is Vahe Berberian, is officially authorized by the theater commander under the provisions of war to retain all his personal property. The articles listed below.
Okay. And what are those articles listed?
One at this time was the German P-38, which I have a picture of.
Is that this one here that
That's the
I'm putting
one.
in front of the camera?
Right.
That's a German P-38.
That's a German.
Is that also considered to be a Luger?
That's like the Luger.
Okay. Where did you find this?
That was in one of the battles. That was from one of the.
Heavy.
Very
Doesn't have any
heavy,
bullets in it,
yeah.
does it?
No.
Okay. And this Luger was you found it in a German leather case.
Right.
Like this, right? So you're allowed to have that. A beautiful clip. Okay. Oh, and this is for the clip. Okay. And then
This is something.
you also brought this back with you, right?
Yeah, that was just a German pistol that I found, as we were going through the.
As you're
town.
going through town.
Yeah.
And
This,
that was found with its case, like this. Is that right?
Right.
And you were allowed by that certificate to bring that back with you.
This is what I want to tell you about.
Okay. Okay, next you've given me something from the War Department, Adjutant General's Office, regarding an investigation of the status of Corporal Albert L.C. Yandel, member of Company C, 55th Armored Engineer Battalion, who was reported missing in action and presumed dead. So you were asked to help with this investigation?
Well, in this particular case, Corporal Yandel, who was my who was my platoon corporal.
Yeah.
His wife, when the War Department said he was dead, wouldn't believe it. So they sent.
The wife wouldn't believe it?
The wife would not believe he was dead.
Yeah.
And so the War Department sent all the members that were in his platoon a letter.
And this was one of the letters that you received?
I received a letter from the War Department to say the last time that I saw Corporal Yandel and what happened. And I was sorry to write back to the War Department that I saw Corporal Yandel in the Battle of the Bulge as we were retreating, trying to get into a tank that was going, and just as he reached the tank. An 88 shell hit and
Hit the tank.
hit the tank, and that was the end. So I wrote a letter to the War Department that I saw him being killed no more than, he probably was no more than 50 yards from me. So
And you knew it was him.
I was positive it was him. So they wrote a letter to his wife about what I had to say, and that finally made her sure that her husband was gone.
Okay, all right. Well, she received closure.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have a picture here of Blood and Guts pilot's boat. Can you tell
That
us
was
anything about that?
that was a picture of
General Patton.
General Patton, who was our general, and that was at the end of the war when we finally were in Garmisch and the war ended.
Uh-huh.
This was the resort area that he took over and said that it was going to be for his strong, valiant men from 10th Army to spend time there relaxing
At
after the
Garmisch.
war was over.
So this is Tuesday, July 31, 1945, and it says Blood and Guts pilot's boat. So General George Patton, seated at right, takes the wheel of a motor launch on Lake Ebe, E-I-B, during a celebration of the Garmisch Partition in Germany, July 14, marking the 3rd anniversary of the 10th Armored Division. Other officers are unidentified. So it shows that General Patton was taking care of his troops.
He did.
In Garmisch, and that's where you were. Okay, and next we have, what's this medal? This is a good conduct medal, is it?
That's a good conduct medal for,
You're the recipient of that?
I am.
Okay, and
That's the other.
this is the medal that goes with it?
Right.
Okay.
Is
Okay,
that
and
the
it says
medal?
here,
Wait a minute now, Greg.
Go
Let
ahead.
me just see this here.
sure.
I'm not sure, Greg, whether this was the presidential citation for Bastogne.
Really?
No, that goes with that.
This is efficiency, honor, fidelity.
Yeah, that's the good conduct.
That's the good conduct medal. I've had other interviews where this has been cited as a good conduct medal.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
What else do we have
I
here?
don't think there's much more, Greg.
Okay, here's a certificate that you've captured the enemy equipment and you're entitled to keep it.
Right?
And,
When was this here? This is,
okay.
this,
Okay, now here's something here. It says Headquarters Armored Center, saying that we think you'll be interested in a marked story mentioning PFC Vahe Berberian of the 10th Armored Division, which will be found in the enclosed copy of the Armored News.
that was that gold thing.
That was, which one was that?
The picture where I was with the gold bars.
Oh, yes, yes, where you are leaning on $15 million worth
You're
of
right.
gold bars.
This is just
And here we have a recapitulation, looks like a history. Recapitulation of verbal orders issued to effect the river crossing at AYL Germany, Isle Germany, on February 22, 1945 to February 25, 1945.
that's the Saar River
That was the
crossing.
Saar River where you...
That was the detailed description of the
Right.
run.
There are 4 pages recapitulating all the verbal orders that we're giving. So that's quite a history of the Armored Division.
Right.
Okay. So that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it, I think, right?
All right. Okay, now, we've gone through your story and your memorabilia, and at the present time, you're a member of the Post 41 AMVETS, the Corporal Paulus Marsupial post in Watertown, Mass. Is that right?
That's
How
correct.
did you get to join the post?
Well, I was one of the original 17 members who started, who had the idea of starting a post of Armenian ancestry. And we started in a little one-room place and worked our way up until now. We have this, our own post here with a, which we built, I don't know how many years ago, and to me, it was one of the nicest things that happened because we get together during the day, now that we're all older and retired, spend time here, playing cards, playing tableau, just coming over, watching television, but it's a place to come and relax in our older days.
With your fellow veterans?
Right.
Right. And you're not only proud of your nationality, but you're also proud of your country and the
am.
service that you rendered
That's right.
to your country. And you started this post. You helped start the post.
We did.
And where did it start?
Well, it started in Watertown, and we originally started in one room in some house, and then as we got more and more members, we kept expanding and expanding until we finally did well enough to build
Build the building.
This building here, which
Right.
which is now ours.
And I think while most veterans organizations are declining in membership, we're increasing. We're up to about 140, 160 at a time. And one last thing I want to ask you is to identify this piece of clothing. What is that?
That was the jacket that was issued to me when the war was over and I came home.
Lift it up a little bit. That's an Ike jacket, isn't it?
That's right. It's an Eisenhower jacket, and this.
What do the stripes mean?
The stripes means how many.
Length of service?
Like the service.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that's every month or what.
Well, I was in the service. I was released early from the service because it went on a point system, and I had
Yeah.
spent a lot of my time overseas and in combat, so I had more points. So I was actually not even in the service 3 years.
What does the shoulder patch on the right side of that mean?
That's
What's the shoulder patch of? What
That's the
unit?
10th Armored Division insignia, which was we was well known as the Fighting Tigers.
The Fighting Tigers. That's the 10th Armored Division.
10th Armored Division.
Okay. And then, of
Played a
course,
big part in World War II.
okay, and then there's a badge on the right breast of the jacket. What is that? No, right breast. Right under the right lapel. Yeah, what's that insignia?
Well, that's the insignia of the Engineer Battalion.
I think that's a discharge, honorable discharge badge, isn't it?
Oh, is that what that is?
Veterans badge.
Yeah, that's what
Honorable
that is.
discharge badge.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Very good. Okay, Vi, we've gone through most of this history, all of this history, and your advices and your feelings about war and combat. Can you think of any question that I haven't asked you?
Well, Greg, I think we've
Covered
done-
most of it?
We've covered most of it.
Okay. So then if that's the case, then we'll kind of sign off here, won't we, huh?
We will.
Okay. Well, I think you've seen one of the more colorful stories and one of the more graphic stories of one of our veterans who served in World War II, as documented by his memorabilia, his stories, and his personal testimony. I am particularly proud to be associated with veterans such as Vahe Berberian, and because we have many veterans of Post 41 in Watertown, Massachusetts, who have had similar heroic experiences serving this country. And so as long as you don't have anything further, Vahe, we're going to sign this off. And I will be forever thankful for your participation in the Oral History Project. And we'll sign off. This is Major Greg Arabian, honorably discharged from the United States Air Force and Oral History Director of Post 41, signing off at this time and thanking you for your time and your participation.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay.